think.
The bathrooms are pretty busy.
Huh?
The bathrooms are pretty busy.
Oh, okay. Thanks for sharing.
Probably a better presentation.
Probably.
Just help.
Thank you, Dr. Kinley. We'll just have to run over that. Christina, you just started it. Is it all right?
Yes.
I know how to keep it. Immediately after me? Yeah, interesting, isn't it? You're doing the racing games, aren't you? Good luck. You sure? Yeah, no, they should.
The lesson planning part is what Canberra and how Parasite is complement the course profile.
Navigation.
So it's the background information and the FTA. Yeah, but I'm she yeah, because we'll look at it because it's
Oh, I see.
printed and packaged and shrink wrapped all together as 910 and 10 is bigger because it's got to the goes for both. Now we could figure out some way of doing a special order and printing out. You ready?
I'm about to start. It's all right. It's all right.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name's Shelley Sweeney. And one thing, since this is really actually our first smaller meeting, I just want you to be aware that there's these program evaluations. Will you please try to fill these out, and I'll be collecting them at the back, okay? And today's presenter is Steve Mitchell. I'd like to introduce you to him. Actually, I just met him myself. Steve, but I know about him because I've used his book. He is an associate professor at Kent State University for our people from around the world. That's in Ohio. He actually did his undergraduate and his master's work at Loughborough in the United Kingdom, and then came over to the States and did his PhD at Syracuse University in the state of New York. Steve Steve's worked at the middle school level and the high school level, particularly with the tactical approach. His advisor when he was an undergraduate and master's was with Len Ullman. So I'm sure he has lots to offer us. Steve.
Yeah, I did do some master's degree work with that, and I've got to know him a little bit of that, so it's nice to see him here this morning. It was nice to be starting off with the first sort of on-the-floor presentation this week. That means I can get mine done and enjoy the rest. Welcome, and thank you for being here this morning. We have a bit of a tight activity space. This is the oddest shaped gymnasium we're ever likely to find ourselves in when we look at the walls, but we're just going to do the best we can with it. I've set out activity spaces where I can keep about 14 of you occupied at a time. So you can switch in and out if you want to, or if we get 14 people out on the floor that are comfortable out on the floor, that's fine as well. What I want to share with you this morning is really some work that myself and a couple of colleagues of mine, Judy Oswald and Linda Griffith, are trying to do right now in moving where we've been with the tactical games teaching at the secondary level and try and take it down as far as we can to the elementary level. It really has come about because since we wrote our book and we've done a number of workshops for public school teachers, many elementary teachers have said to us, you know, we just having a real hard time taking what we've got in here and scaling it down and saying, you know, how can we fit this into our small gymnasiums with the time constraints that we have when I have a class of 20 or 30 students that I'm working with, and they leave, they line up at the door, and I have another class standing outside the door waiting to come in immediately. I don't have time to be running around setting up nets, setting up fields of play, and adjusting all sorts of things. And they were finding those things very, very difficult. So there were some organizational issues that we found a lot of elementary teachers were having. They were having problems related to time. You know, they get 25, 30, maximum 35 minutes with their classes. So they're having some problems there also. And they're having a real difficult time. Len was talking about representation and exaggeration of games. They were having a real hard time scaling the nature of gameplay down so that it was such that you know, young elementary students could play those games and could learn from a tactical standpoint. And so I was on sabbatical spring of 2000, best semester of my life. Had a very good time. But I spent 10 weeks of that sabbatical teaching on a part-time basis in one of our local elementary schools. And that was great for me to get back on the gym floor with public school kids. I spent a lot of time coaching youth sport, but not much time actually on the gym floor in the public school setting. So that was very nice for me. And so I went in with the express intention of saying to myself, how can I take this material that is quite solid, we found, for 5th, 6th grade and up? How can I take this material and bring it down to say, let's say we're going to start at the 2nd grade level, is where I try to pitch the material at, and just use it as a learning experience. I taught at the middle and high school level. I coached little ones in youth sport, but I haven't taught them in a physical education setting. And it's very, very different, because you're dealing with larger numbers, and you're not dealing with a volunteer population, and you all know all this happening. So it was quite different. If you can imagine this room as being square, or rather rectangular, without the kind of odd-shaped walls and everything else in the way. This was about the size of gymnasium I was working in, maybe a little longer and maybe a tad wider. But if you look here, I'm going to get you up and play in a moment. We're going to do some net games this morning, and I want you to, imagine that you're 2nd graders, and as you go through, you'll find this quite straightforward for the most part, and I'll talk to you about how 2nd graders work with this type of material. Who teaches at the elementary level? Is there anybody here? So there's a number of you that will associate with this immediately, and you can already associate with the 25 kids lined up here, 25 kids lined up there, this type of thing. Right, what are we going to do now? And so there are some real organizational issues. So let's start with that. This essentially is the net. You know, the first thing you don't have time to do while a class of 5th graders is on the way outside the door, a class of 2nd graders is on the way in. You don't have time to put up a bunch of nets. So here are your nets. So we'll have one pair playing across here. We'll have another pair playing across here. And so you can see we've got yellow cones, orange cones, yellow cones. So we've got a yellow net, orange net. And the way I organised this, because I had different takedowns from, say, the 5th graders, as it happened, it was a 5th grade group on the way out, when my 2nd grade class was on the way in. I take down, little square of orange tape there, little square of orange tape here, yellow tape there, yellow tape there. So there's just lots of little squares of tape on the floor. And the cones were just sort of set on the bleachers here, and they were with a partner that they were with throughout. As they entered, one person was responsible for collecting their 2 cones, and one person was responsible for collecting the ball, and I had four boxes of balls. Okay? And they were all sort of lined up across the middle, in between my 2 sets of net games courts. And one fetched the ball, they could choose whichever ball they wanted. I taught by invitation, and I invite you to select whichever ball you like, and we'll experiment and see which ones work best. I've got all this in a handout incidentally, so you don't need to worry too much about writing stuff down. And so there were those organisational issues, and that's the way I dealt with those. So rather than coming into the gym and sitting around the circle, which I see so often, or sitting on spots or in squads, they came straight in and they set up their own court. And this took a session or 2 for us to train them to do. And then they could start playing where we left off the previous lesson. So that enabled us to really speed things up. And setup was minimal, setup was easy, takedown was easy. I put some sort of floor spot lines along the floor here. There were lines on the gymnasium floor, so that worked fairly well. I could sort of make a dividing line there and all the boxes of balls in there. Okay? All right. So the second issue for many of the elementary teachers was that of scaling down the game. Now, what I want to do with you this morning is show you how with second graders I took the notion of net games, and you'll soon see that we're leading towards beginning a modified sort of a tennis game here. And then we did some net games, then we just turned it around and did some games against the wall, and we taught some tactical principles through that medium. Okay? But the first thing that we had to do is get them playing a game of some kind. And for those of you that teach second graders, you know that they are somewhat limited in the way that they can play games. One of the first question marks that might be arising for you, and I should mention this, because many teachers have this concern, I find, we've got a game going on here, we've got a game going on here, and we've got a game there and a game there. Incidentally, I had 6 courts, so I have another one there and another one there. So I could fit 6 courts this way, 12 people playing, 6 courts that way, 12 people playing, 24 students playing singles, which was really what I wanted, playing singles. Okay? But what happens, when this ball goes into this game? Well, what I found was second graders were very easily able to abide by 2 simple rules, and they did this extremely well. I was pleasantly surprised. Number 1, when your ball goes into somebody else's court, you just stop it and you roll it back, because we know that the boot, let's see how far I can kick this because it's not mine, and we didn't get any of that. And when somebody else's ball, when your ball goes into somebody else's court, you go to the edge and you stop. That was the second rule. And I find that they were, you could see it, ready to go into the other court, and they kind of stopped there, like that. And they really did that extremely well. And so other people's balls on your court or your ball on somebody else's court did not become an issue at all. Okay? So, here's the game to start with, and I've kept you sat for long enough. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 courts. Yeah, and 1, 2, 3 courts because of the odd-shaped wall there. So we can have 7 pairs playing. The game that we simply started, Becky, can you help me out here? Just to start with, we're going to play a cooperative game. We're on the orange court. The rules are very simple. This is a throw-catch game. And it's cooperative to start with. Our target is 10. After that, it goes up in increments of 2. 10, 12, 14, 16. All throws must be underhand. The ball must bounce once on the other side of the net, but it cannot bounce twice. But it must bounce once. And it has to bounce inside the baseline at the back. Okay? So, here we go. 1, 2, 3. All underhand. Okay. And stop. And we'll talk in a little while about why that underhand rule is important, in case you haven't figured it out already. All right? And why the 1 bounce rule is important, and I think you'll see that as we move on. Okay? We'll just get you moving, then we'll try and move forward. Thanks, Steve. Choose your own ball. Please feel free to switch ball at any time you like.
I never see you in Singapore.
I was going to say, you don't see each other.
Self-stay.
Hey, do you still do?
That's
can't
our
find the
court.
court.
Wait, we're gonna take this court. This is, here's our court.
Looks like, yeah, you can always sub it with somebody, okay? Because all our courts are taken up right now.
Where are you from?
Oh, there's the net, okay. Remember that handout from,
Let's not go there yet.
I don't know where it is.
Let's not go there yet. Moving on a little bit too quickly. And stop. Thank you. That's a good start. And so, to be perfectly honest, it took us about a lesson and a half in order to teach them the setup procedure, takedown procedure, and how to get into this game straight away. That was time very well spent because I didn't have to spend time explaining how to get into a game situation ever again. All right, now this is very easy for all of you, so what I'd like you to do just for a little while, please make sure that you do change the ball from time to time, and we'll talk about which type of ball works best. But what I'd like you to do, please, is play one-handed. All right? You'd still throw catch, we're not striking. Play one-handed, but make it your weak hand. All right? Just so that we can try and understand a little bit how this feels to second graders. Okay? Go ahead. Play with your weaker hand, please. Your weaker hand.
Teaching is cheating.
Yeah.
We wouldn't use it.
Yeah, take 5. So high.
I should have stopped. And stop. Good, thank you. Now, we'll talk about the balls in a moment, and I'm going to ask you to change the balls one more time so that you've used at least 2 or 3 different balls. As you do so, and as you continue playing now, would you please bear in mind that second graders are about this high? Okay? Because in a moment I'm going to ask you what type of ball you think is working best. Part of representation, and particularly exaggeration, is the modification of equipment. And it is very important. I want you also to bear in mind, you won't be teaching on a carpet. Alright? Unlikely. Alright? You will be teaching on a hard gymnasium floor, and I want you to bear in mind that your second graders are going to be about this high. Okay? Well, between there and there. Right? Go ahead.
Remember, there's a net there.
How high is the net?
The net is simply the line right now.
Hello, who was
All
listening?
throws happen all over.
Hello, were you listening? Let's see how high you're going to not hit the ceiling.
What do you think second graders would say is the best ball? Oh, they're very bouncy.
Probably depends on what kind of balls you love to play with.
Have a soccer ball.
Most of my kids play
No, no, but that's
No.
I like this little thing.
Remember, they're little kids.
And stop. Okay. Places where stay where you are. Talk to me about which types of balls are working well, which type of balls are not working well for you.
What's more difficult and what's easier?
Which helps you play the game better. And again, I want you to think in terms of you are a second grade student who is this high and you're not playing on a carpet. Think about which of these balls is going to help you play the game more effectively.
This.
This one's great.
What's good about that?
It's slow and it's light.
Okay, it's slow and it's light. Any of these balls,
It's big.
it's big so it's easy to catch. Any of these which would be more difficult?
Yeah, this one is.
Yeah, the ones that bounce.
Yeah.
These are really heavy.
Yeah.
Heavy.
Very
And I
heavy.
put some of those in because often those are the first things people will move to.
Yeah.
Those were disaster. All right, because you've got a second grader up here, ball bounces and it's coming straight up at the head.
Yeah.
And one of the first questions that I can start to ask people now, ask my elementary students now, is where is it easier for you to make a good catch of this ball? Now that's kind of a broad, open-ended question, and so sometimes I had to narrow that question down and say, is it easier for you to catch the ball if it's coming up at you, or if it's going down? And of course the answer is if it's on its way down. And so what do you have to do so that you can get into the right place to catch the ball on its way down? Well, yeah, I've got to move my feet a little bit. And so I can get them thinking about this idea of getting into a comfortable position to make a catch. Okay? And at this point, anytime I need to, I can intervene. You can all do this very, very easily. And I want you to bear in mind that some second grade students cannot do this very, very easily. If I need to intervene and teach opposition and teach a nice swing this way or that way, I can do that at any point in time. Okay? All right. What we'll do now is we will say that you can go and score some points, so you can try and make this a little bit more of a competitive game now. And we'll say that the ball still must bounce once, but it cannot bounce twice. So you score a point if the ball bounces twice on the other side of the net, or if it bounces in front of the net or outside the line. Those are rules that I can say to you, and you understand those very, very easily. What I need to do with second graders is bring everybody in, sit them down, and say, you score a point if this happens. And I need to show them that. So I need to set up demonstrations of, how these points are scored, because it won't sink in from a verbal explanation like I can give to you. So understand I'm taking some shortcuts with you, and those of you that teach second, third graders know that I can't take those shortcuts with second, third graders.
How many steps can I take? That's always a question.
Good
Let's say
question.
The ball bounces way back here and the kid catches it here. How many steps?
You can't.
Okay.
You
that's
can't.
all, but they'll ask that. They'll ask
Okay,
how many
right.
steps. They want to get closer.
Sure. Good question.
Throw it from where they are.
Throw it from where it's caught. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Go ahead. Now you're going to be a little bit squashed here now because but that's okay if you want to. I don't mind. Or
Let's have one practice with the ball.
if two of you want to play across here, I don't mind. It's up to you. A little bit of camera. Problem.
Practice with the ball.
Right in the way.
Does any have one?
Okay, we're using.
Well, we've got a good picture of you.
You get a bit, okay, I'm ready.
What do you want to say? You have to use a non-dominant?
Are we still doing non-dominant? Yeah, yeah.
And stop, stand still, please. Now, see, because you're adults and I allow you to score points, now we're getting somewhere. I want to remind you, and there will be posters on the walls of the rules of this game. All throws must be underhand. Okay, because this will get out of hand very, very quickly, because even second graders will start to realize that as soon as they are allowed to score some points and they know how, they will figure out ways to do that. I want to show you the most effective ball, and it doesn't come out of a Sport Time catalogue or anything else. It comes from my grocery store. Yeah. All right, and it cost me 99 cents per ball, and these were great. All right, these were just great. So I went to the grocery store last week and made sure I had a new one to bring, because I didn't figure they'd have any here because they would be college balls. All right, but these are real nice, okay, and they look nice in the catalogue. This was the most effective ball by far, because if you haven't figured out already, the extension of this logically, when we move on to striking, will be to strike it with the hand rather than having an implement in the hand. And so these, they're just terrific to strike also. All right, get 20 of those, $20, great investment to do this type of stuff with. If everyone wants to continue with that, you can do. Otherwise, continue game for a couple of minutes now. Just remember, please, all throws under. Go.
Under here below, right?
Well, no, it hits the ceiling. Okay.
Yeah, I just brought the one. Now remember your court here. You've got all the way between the two.
We could do skip counting. 2, 4, 6. You gotta count. 8. All right, let's do prime numbers.
Oh, God.
1. Hello, Mark.
What's the prime number?
3, 5, 7, 11. All right, let's think of something else. The second graders would do that.
No.
Let's do names of sports.
We just did it by odd numbers. That's just do odd numbers.
Oh, you skip counting odd numbers.
Does it count use odd numbers? 3.
And stop.
5.
Okay, great. if you like now, you could put your balls down at the court, or you could put it back in the tub there, and just come on back to the overhead, please, if you would.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to have you sit for a few moments. And actually what would really help is if we could have this court spare. Okay, I'll need you again in a moment. Okay? Good. So, we've got started, and what we have now is second graders who are playing some competitive games. They know how to score. But, interestingly enough, as I was watching you play there, and you're allowed to score points now, very few of you that I could see were really using the rules of the game in order to think from a tactical standpoint. Okay? B? Let's go. Trainer soccer balls work quite well as well, which is why I brought this. I want you to remember that the rule says the ball must bounce once on the other side of the net. Okay? And so what I did see one or two second graders doing quite early was this. Oops. We had a high ceiling. Play. Okay, so B's figured that out. That ball must bounce once. Okay, play. Okay, that's out of court. See, now it gets just a little bit more active. That's a good catch. So now that gets a little bit more active, and again, this is adults doing it. We cover much more of the court than second graders. For me to send the ball back there for a second grader, they've got to travel much further, and it's more difficult for them to judge the bounce and figure out where they're going to be, and they're all the way back here. And then, of course, I can start to ask the tactical questions that I might ask. Okay? If you have to try and make the ball bounce twice on the other side of the net, you need space. Where are the spaces on this court? And it's a no-brainer, it really is. They're at the front and they're at the back because we've constructed the court that way. So we've set up the environment here so that we have the long, thin court, and there's only space really here and here. There really isn't space side to side. And then I can say to them, well, is it more difficult for you to play when you're at the front or when you're at the back? And the answer to that would be more difficult for you to play from the back. And I can ask why. Well, because you're further away and it's a longer throw from here. So then where do you want to try and send your opponent to make it more difficult for them? You want to try and send them to the back. And then we can have them go away and play some more, and then we'll be getting this notion of depth within the court. Okay? All right. And that's where we can continue in a moment. What my colleagues and I have kind of habitually done, and you've got a copy of this in the handout that I have for you. What my colleagues and I have habitually done is try to say to ourselves, how do we break games down tactically? What are the problems involved in various types of games? And if you've looked at the book that we wrote, we've done it with invasion games, with various types of invasion games. We've done it with 2 or 3 different net games. And what we're trying to do at the elementary level is say, can we look at the commonalities between invasion games and between net games? And say, can we break net games down rather than breaking down badminton, tennis, volleyball? Can we just break down net games? And if we can, what are the essential tactical elements of those net games? And if we look at it, this is an attempt. This is my attempt to do this for net games. Really, if we break the tactical problems, the what to do down, into 2 components, it will be scoring and preventing scoring. Okay? If we just look at scoring, because this is where we're moving to now, the first thing that we did was work on just keeping a rally going. Here. Maintaining a rally. Because if your students can't do that, then you really don't have a game. So that's where we went to first. Again, those of you that teach at the elementary are going to recognize that. We have to scale the game down so that it is sufficiently simple that it can be played by second grade students or wherever you're starting. Okay? Once we do that, and we solve that problem by looking at movements to catch, Here, incidentally, I have to apologise. There's a typo on there. That shouldn't be there. Using a target forward. This is a punishment that you get for using an Invasion Games template to develop your NetGames materials from. I forgot to hit the delete key in the appropriate places. So I'm going to fess up. That shouldn't be there. All right. So cross that out when you get yours. Nor should these 4 things here. Okay. So get rid of those 2. I didn't have an overhead pen with me. I found this out in the car on the way up here. So I apologise. But there we are. So the first thing that we've done is maintain the rally. Then we've looked at how do we set ourselves up to attack, and then eventually we would look at, we probably won't get there this morning, but we would look at how to win a point. Okay? And then we would look at, you know, do we hit it hard? We can be looking at overhead shots at that point, but by the time we've got to there, we've probably got brackets in our hand and they're probably in the 4th or 5th grade by that point in time. Okay? We solve these problems by various decisions and movements when we are not actually throwing or later on striking, and we also solve those problems by underhand throw, underhand striking skills. So we try to break games down that way. Right? And this is just an example of how we might do that with net war games. And once we play a little bit more, I'll drag the overhead down again and talk about progression from, you know, early stages of net war learning as we might go throughout the elementary school period. Questions at this point? Ask them as we go. There's no need to save them until the end. Sarah?
Have you broken down a wall game yet?
You know, I'm kind of looking at this all as one, net and wall, and what you'll see is in a moment, once we play a little bit more, we're actually going to start playing against the walls and look at how those tactical issues that we've dealt with across the nets really apply in just the same way as they would across the walls, on the walls. Okay?
I'm just thinking that maintaining a rally, maybe if you're playing a wall game, you don't even have to maintain the rally. You simply have to be able to catch and throw against a wall. That's a simpler skill than catching and throwing with a partner.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. Yeah, I would. What I am trying to avoid here, though, is breaking down individual net games and breaking down individual war games. Because, personally, the way I think we need to try and approach games teaching at the elementary school is teach them conceptually, so that once you've gotten so far, to about the point you're at now, you can go between the net and the wall. And, you know, there were a couple of sessions where I started off playing across the nets, then we turned around and played against the walls. And we were essentially applying the same things, doing the same things, it's just that we were going across the net or against the wall. And part of the point that we were making to elementary students, and second graders picked up on this very, very easily, the notion of we're really doing the same thing. Yeah? We're trying to hit space and we're trying to set ourselves up to create space, whether we're doing it across the net or whether we're doing it up against a wall. So they did pick that up quite easily. So it's the commonality between all net war games that we're really trying to get at here.
I move into the complicated. Is it possible to throw the ball into the body of the opponent as a player tennis player or something?
Yeah, I think so. Part of what we're doing here, however, is we are throwing it underhand so that they do have a chance to move. If they're throwing it overhand, it's going to come much, much faster. And if they throw it too hard underhand, and if they start doing this where it goes flat, then I have to start saying all throws must go up. So I need to keep a handle on that as the teacher and make sure that they don't start taking advantage of those rules. But yeah, I think if they're throwing it at the body, they still have time, because it's going up, they still have time to be able to move back and catch it after the bounce. Understand here that if I take that one bounce rule out, we end up with a throw and catch game. And so really what I want to get at here is the up and back movement in order to create space to set yourself up to attack. Without that one bounce rule, that won't happen. Because Becky could just stand here and anything that I throw up high, she'll just catch it here. And it'll be a straight throw and catch game. So to get the movement up and back, I need that one bounce rule.
Do you have the kids question how long they can hold it before they must throw it?
No?
So if the kid catches, they can just stand there for a long time.
Yeah, but you know what?
Step in and say, yeah, you got to add another rule.
One of the discussions that we did get to was, are you going to be able to make your opponent move more effectively if you keep the ball in your hands a long time, or if you release the ball quickly? Okay, and as we move on, we're going to move on now. We'll let you sort of set yourselves up to attack a little bit more. We'll talk about the defensive space, and that's where those discussions came into play. Okay, Susan.
I wasn't here at the beginning, but did you have to catch the ball, or could you bat it back?
Right now, we're only on throw catch. Okay, second grade.
You can set the bench, then we will force them to...
You could, yeah, you could. Part of what I was trying to avoid here was set-up time, and you know the necessity for second graders to try and set up nets or to try and drag sort of benches out. A colleague of mine used skipping ropes, but they were still at floor height. So there are some organisational issues, and some of those become trade-offs. You know, do I sacrifice the time for equipment setup, or do I sacrifice a little bit of elevation off the ground so that I increase my learning time? So those are trade-offs. Okay, let's go back and play. Let me really see you now work your opponent up and down the court, please. I'm going to give you a few minutes. I want to see some red faces. Let's go.
Let's change sides.
Shelley, this is by court now. This is by court now.
All right, and the transfer of tennis.
Come on, folks, make your move.
All right, on our side. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, good shot.
Yeah, all right, 1 to 1 half, right?
There we go, getting way back. Way back, there we go. Oh. Going on. And stop. Great. Now, at this point, you are going to see some things as I've just seen, and it's Mark. What did I see from you?
Using deception as far as...
Little bit of disguise where we get this type of thing, and then something more gentle just to drop it over. And so we can start talking about those things, deception, and how that comes into play, and those are very teachable moments. All right? But now let's move on a little bit, and let me just ask you, so if your opponent is trying to push you to the back of the court, what do you think you need to do once you've played your own throw? To the front, move to where? Move to the middle. Why to the middle? Because you go either way, and you don't know whether the next one is going to go for long or short. Because, of course, what you'll see with the typical second grader is, you know, nice throw, good throw. Oh, look at that. And then, of course, the next one drops. And so we've got to say, yeah, so play your throw and then get back to the middle. Okay? Get back to the middle. And, of course, now, from a tactical standpoint, if we want to use the lingo, we're talking about defensive space on our own side of the net, which, if you recall back to the overhead, was the first tactical problem that we talked about under preventing scoring. If I can close down the space on my side of the net, then I'm going to make it much more difficult for my opponent to score against me. Okay? So, let's see if we can do that now. Let's do a nice job of setting ourselves up to attack, and let's do a nice job of defending space by recovering to centre court.
Yeah, I did too.
A lot of things.
More golf lately. You have to throw.
You can't move when you...
But after we,
Yeah, right.
see, we can cover this in. But for the second
Christina. That's the argument. And stop. Good. Christina asked me, you know, do I dovetail these things into the same lesson? And the answer is no, I didn't do that. Essentially, these were separate lessons. The notion of up and back was one lesson, and then I could say at the end of that lesson, now when you come in for your next lesson, you get straight into this game, and then once they've been in that game for a little while, then we can start talking about the defense of space by recovering to center court, which was a separate lesson in and of itself. All right, so, you know, little bits at a time, layer upon layer, but always beginning with the game and getting back to the game. So the game is really central to what we're doing here.
How many lessons would you spend on this? As part of the unit of teaching this?
In your handout, right now you're up to about lesson 4.
Okay.
Okay? All right. And I have those lessons for you in the handout. Okay? All right. Now here's what we will do. And, you know, imagine this now. I did bring second graders in and sort of show them this, but here's what we do. Let's take Shelley and Jamie. Okay. Could you both go inside your cones, please? Both inside the cones. Keep going that way, Shelley. Keep going that way. Keep going that way. Keep going that way. Go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, inside.
Good.
Okay.
And stop. All right, come stand next to each other, facing the wall. Okay. Now, without moving the cones, all right, now we have a wall game. Okay? And these are the corners of your court now, and what we'll give you we'll give you 2 segments of wall. All right? 2 segments of wall, 2 segments of wall, 2 segments of wall. Divide that end wall up between you, and what I suggest for this pair is, well, Linda's standing, all right? Put a couple of cones there and use a wall there. Okay, bear in mind once again that I didn't have all these sloping walls, so I've got a rectangular gymnasium where I've got walls at each end. I had the old-fashioned gymnasium with the pull-down dining room tables. Perfect. All right, because each of those tables now becomes the wall that you have to play against. So that was a nice way of using the environment rather than saying, oh, these tables are a nuisance. Well, they actually weren't. They really helped me out quite a lot there. Okay? So the rules are the same. You must start off side by side, and you alternate service. Service must be underhand, and the ball must go up. It can hit anywhere on the wall. And now let's see if we can do just what we've done across our net on the wall. Okay? Go ahead. We're catching still. We're catching still. There you go, JJ. Good job.
Now the line is good, or is it out like tennis? Is it good? Okay. When we serve, when you serve.
And stop. Okay, now, I stop you fairly quickly, and you're all doing quite well. Well, what I did see with second graders is that without the reminder at first, this now becomes a game of throw and catch up against the wall. And so we do need the reminders. Okay, look, we said when we were playing across the net, where is it more difficult to play from here? From the back. So if you're going to get your opponent to the back when you're playing against the wall, where do you need to hit the wall at? A little bit higher up. Now we're limited here by the ceiling, obviously. All right, so you won't be able to throw it way up high on the wall and have it rebound to the back. But they were. And so we got some real good, essentially, you know, one wall handball, which was working real well. But again, we're still at throw and catch here. Okay? So let's just give you that reminder then. Let's get your opponent to the back. And what do we do in between our own shots?
Middle.
We get back to the middle of the court ourselves. Okay? Play. This gives me more space to walk around.
Yeah, we're still letting it bounce.
Yes.
So not only they learn how to do it, but yeah.
In our next group,
So that's about that line mark right there.
okay. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, no. Make sure it bounces inside your cones, please. There you go, very good. leave the balls there, please. Come on into the overhead if you would.
I'm using it.
Okay. So we've gone, we started with throw catch, we're still there, but we've now moved to the wall. So, we could be up to about lesson 5 here, and this is how long it took me to get here, but my students were able to quite clearly see the similarities between what you're trying to do in a net game. And remember, here we're not trying to teach tennis or racquetball. I'm trying to teach the principles of net game play, net wall game play. And they were quite easily able to see. And I think actually we did, one lesson on scoring aspects of wall games, and one aspect of one lesson on defensive space against the wall, and they were quite able to see the similarities between net and wall games after that, which is what I was trying to get to.
Would you play that the entire time? I mean, would you have them come in and just play that? I mean, I have 45 minutes. I would normally do something with a warm-up, something that would be this for the meat of the lesson, and then something with a pull-down.
You had about 15 minutes more than I had. Okay, and you would probably make faster progress than I did. I would say it depends on what you're doing for your warm-ups. I don't know what that would be. Personally, I like to see that related to what we're doing within the major part of the session. Personally, I prefer to see warm-ups in some kind of game or other. So I think probably if I had 45 minutes, I would have probably just done the type of material that we're working with here, but I would have perhaps made faster progress, so that instead of this being sort of 6 lessons worth so far, we may have been at lesson 4 or something like that. But either way, either way.
And we're saying that if this is grade 2, how this might look at grade 8 or how this might look at grade 10, is it, again, just speed of moving through? Like you could do similar kinds of things.
Yeah. You could, but that really relates directly to where we're going to go now, in terms of, how might this look as they go through. Now this is a little confusing, and it takes a little bit of time to look at. But what myself and Judy and Linda, my colleagues, have also tried to do is say, okay, if we're identifying practical problems and their solutions, how is the game that we're going to have our students play going to look at different developmental levels as they go through, in this case, the elementary system? And so, here I'm looking at essentially what we've done. Really very, very simple games. They're not complex at all. And so I call it game complexity level 1. And it's really a throw-catch game. And if you look down this level 1 column, what this is saying to you is that really, if I'm, just for argument's sake, say that I'm looking at this as being 2nd grade, once they've done this net wall games unit with me in second grade, I'm looking for a throw-catch game that looks essentially like that, against the wall and across the net. Okay? Now, if they then come back, let's say 3rd, 4th grade, they come back and they look at net wall games again. Now we'd be moving on. And the teacher that I was working with, she took my second grade stuff, she redid it with another 2nd grade class. Then she went on with a 3rd grade class, and instead of doing the throw catch, she started striking. One-hand striking. And as an introduction to striking net games, to tennis in particular, personally I think this is much more effective than putting a racket, no matter how short, in the hand. Simply because any extension to the hand adds to the skill complexity of the activity for the novice learner. So I would argue, get a bunch of these which are ever so easy to strike, and use the hand to begin with, and at which point you can be talking about being in the right place to play the shot, movement of feet, those sorts of things. Okay? And she did that with 3rd graders and really had great success. And so there we would look at, progressions within the game, one bounce striking with a hand, and now we can also start to move on and think about team-related net games. Look at beginning introductions to volleyball type activities, when we start looking at a 2 contract on each side of the net, throw and catch, no bounce now. So that we can start to introduce some of, we can make the courts wider, we can start to introduce some of those sort of concepts as well.
I was just going to ask you, did, you know, with the younger groups, did you ever work with boundaries? You know, they talk about shrink, you know, making...
Well, yeah, essentially their boundaries, when they were playing across the net, the boundaries were in line with the cones, and they were, you know, all I had was cones here for the net and the line at the back. And they did a really nice job of saying, no, it bounced here, it was outside, so that's the point. Or against the wall, again, this is all I had, a designated area of the wall for them to hit against, and 2 cones here. I didn't put lines up here, and they did a really nice job of being able to say, no, that bounced out, that's the point. Occasional sort of a dispute, yeah, I'm not presenting this as all roses, but, you know, they did do a real good job of being able to resolve any disputes about score, do-overs, those sorts of things.
I guess what I was referring to, in order to encourage like long ball hits, did you ever take and say, okay, now let's shrink this, make this court a little bit narrower?
I didn't get any bigger than this when I was playing singles. Okay, this actually was about the size. Back to here, back to here with about this width. Okay. A little bit later on, you'll see in your handout lessons 7 and 8, we went to groups of 2 and 3. We did increase the width of the court, so they could now use more angles. And at that point, I did sacrifice a little time and have up some nets. And they played, you know, alternate hit sort of doubles, or this was still second grade, alternate throw and catch doubles. And with the numbers issue, I had lines of 3, throw it, run around the back of your line, that type of thing. So in terms of length, I kept it about this. I did increase the width though, so to give them more options about where they could land the ball into space. Okay. Other questions so far? Then as you look across here, we're definitely building up the sophistication, the complexity of the netball type game that we would be looking at. And in level 3 there, you can see that, yeah, now we're talking about maintaining the rally, using underhand striking, using an implement, and so we've put some short rackets in their hand at that point, making sure we would modify the ball, short racket, sponge ball, especially if you're indoors, tennis trainer ball if you're outdoors, you know, that modification of equipment, once you put a racket and a smaller ball in somebody's hand, modification of equipment is key. And I could associate very much with what Len was saying during his presentation this morning about the 2 groups, one trying to learn tennis with real equipment, real balls, real rackets, and the other using modified equipment, because modified equipment makes life a whole lot easier for the novice learner. Okay? Alright, let's just finish. What I wanted to have you do just to finish was move to striking now, because I can see some of you are itching to do that just a little bit. So we will move to striking. Choose your ball quite carefully now, please. I don't know if these balls, I don't know about those for striking. I would also ask you to choose your ball for the sake of the people in the other room there, all right? Because they're probably already saying, what the heck's going on next door? So let's go to striking against the wall now. The rules are the same, except for now, you may strike the ball with one hand. You must begin each point with a drop underhand strike. Okay? Go. A drop and bounce? Yeah. Bounce it.
I heard about it. Okay, admit it.
Where's the nearest man?
Go down the hall and to
going to need to start talking a little bit more about skill development, because a number of you are seeing the ball bounce, and you know, you're standing here and swinging at it, rather than taking the drop, getting into the right place to play the shot. All right? Or we're getting the ball coming straight back off the wall at you, and this is also the point where we probably need to dispense with the one bounce, has to bounce once rule. Yeah? We probably now need to say, you can play the ball before the bounce if you want to. All right? Because this is not going to turn into a game and if it does turn into a game of just playing what we call on the tennis court sort of a volley all the time, that's okay. Because as a skill, that's quite complex, that's quite difficult. But we're still addressing the problem from a tactical standpoint of setting ourselves up to attack it. Okay? So, be aware from a technical standpoint now of getting into the right place to play the stroke, and let's dispense with the one bounce minimum rule, but still a two bounce maximum rule. Okay? Go. And be aware of where that bounce is outside the court.
Let's improvise. Try not to kill it.
About accuracy and, you know, getting the ball up against the wall in the right place and seeing a lot of this type of stuff. And at that point, this is where I'm probably going to stop my class and say, look, now we need to start working on our level of skill so that we can play proficient shots with a full swing of the hand in this case, so that we are, yes, we are accurate, but we're not sacrificing any power to do that. Okay, if we're really going to be able to set ourselves up effectively, we have to get sufficient distance off the wall for the ball to be coming back with some speed. So we need to do a little bit of work on technique and game-related skill once we get to this point in time. Okay? All right, just to finish off now then, go back to playing across the net, please. All right, same principles, work on those same things.
That ball's not big.
No, it's not.
That one's
And play. Last 2 minutes.
Hit it? All right, go ahead.
All right, is this catching strike one?
Strike, I think.
Oh, you went out. Come in and sit yourself down again, folks. Let's finish our playing there. Let's just, because it's 5 till, we've got 5 minutes just to talk, and then we can get to the poster sessions. I know some of you will probably want to get to that also. Let me just talk a little bit about how quickly your students are going to get to the point that you were at, because once we've talked to some of you about swinging just a little bit, we actually had some quite proficient stuff going on there. Your third graders are not going to get there as quickly. We've moved on from second grade now, of course. They're not going to get there as quickly. They're going to need more skill work. They're going to need more time just to play the game. First of all, to move from throw-catch and keeping the rally going, where they would find throw-catch easy to keep going for 10, 12, 15 throw catches, they're not going to find it anywhere near as easy to keep an underhand striking game going for the same length of time, to keep that rally going. So they are going to have a good deal more playing time just to get the striking pattern down and just to get some consistency within their game. Tim asked me a very good question about, okay, he started off playing probably right-handed, Tim, yeah? And then, for convenience sake, the ball came over here, so then he hit it with his left hand. Do I worry about that? The answer is no, I don't. Right? Not at this point in time. At the point in time down the road when I'm going to put a racket in their hand, yes, I'm going to start worrying about that. Because I'll tell you what, I do teach tennis at Kent State, and I still have at least one or maybe two undergraduates in every tennis class who will do this, then they will do that, and they will do that, all right? And, I nag them, and they'll do it when I'm standing there watching them, but then I go down the other end of the courts, turn around and look back, and then they do again. Okay? And so, that's one of those development of habit things, and, I think it speaks to the benefit of addressing those things at appropriate points in time early on. Okay? But, what have we done? We've modified net games and wall games to a level where, trust me when I say the second graders can do this. They can come in, they can set up the gymnasium for you, they can play, 6 games this end, 6 games that end, without getting in each other's way, without upsetting each other, and they can keep score while they play those games. They are quite capable of understanding the similarities between playing across the net and playing up against the wall, and they are quite capable of transitioning from the net to the wall and implementing those same solutions to tactical problems against the wall that they implemented across the net. Okay? And they do a very good job of that. But I think part of the issue for us is, and I am a believer, that children can play any game, providing we modify the game such that it is at the developmental level that they're at. So we modify it so they can play the game. I've heard many teachers say to me, well, they can't play the game because they don't have the skills. And truly, if we really truly believe that, many of our kids in schools would never get to play games because we'd have to spend all our time working on skills. The whole point here of what we're looking to do is how can we make games representative and exaggerate them and modify them such that children at all levels are able to play those games. And this was successful for me. I think you enjoyed playing here this morning. The second graders that I taught ate this up. They loved it. They loved it because they could play, they could understand it. The throw catch made it real easy for them to get a game going. And some of it actually was real good competitive stuff. I remember one second grade girl, she would get to here. And another real good ball that they played with was a fairly small one. You get them from Little Tykes. They're like modified soft basketballs. And they're terrific. And she would catch a ball here, she'd recover to the middle of the court. And then she played the most phenomenal line drive. And it would come back here horizontal. And she just got extremely good. And the person that she was playing against was also, really good. Second graders. And it looked good stuff. Really good. Other questions?
Sometimes if I'm moving too far away, just to modify the game, but then I shame to talk about skills. Make it black and white, it's wrong. We should teach and devote a little bit time to skills because we don't have all good kids. And in many cases, kids cannot catch and throw, and they are starting at a very different level than the others. And we have 30 kids in the class, 20% don't catch at all, maybe 20 are very good. So we start with problems and we have to do something about it. So we cannot ignore it.
Yeah.
We can do a different modification in different games. So we can do it. Still, throwing and catching and whatever it is.
I think individualizing our instructions for skill learning is critical. And when I think of the second grade class that I had, there was a couple of very proficient boys who picked this up straight away, and they were just at it. And a couple of very proficient girls as well, in fact 3 or 4 very proficient girls who did pick it up very, very well. But then you're quite right, there were kids in the class that had a hard time throwing and catching. And which is why I asked you to go to your weaker hand earlier on. It didn't make much difference, I knew it wouldn't. But you know, with some of those younger ones, they do have a hard time. So yeah, there'll be a place for skill learning. But it's going to be at a point in time where, you know, they can see that they need it for them to play the game more successfully. So that skill learning is going to have that much more meaning for those students. But yeah.
As an instructor, Steve, would you go to maybe that individual court and say to those 2 kids, you know, okay, now let's try using your non-dominant hand, or give them an extra challenge?
If it's only 2 kids, probably yes.
Yeah.
I think the answer is it does depend on how many, on how difficult they're finding it. It may be more appropriate for me to say to the higher ability ones, you know, the half a dozen higher ability ones, you know, let's say you only use one hand to make it your weaker hand, while everybody else tries to, you know, catch up to speed with them. So it does depend on how many, how good the good ones are, how weak the weak ones.
I was going to say along that same line, do you ever mix and mingle kids? Sometimes I take those strong kids and mix them in with the weaker kids so they can help develop those children. Do you find that to be?
Sometimes, yeah, you know, valuable strategy. You know, on the other hand, sometimes I'd really like to see the stronger kids play with each other and against each other, because they like to have a good game. Yet at other times they're really receptive to working with some of the weaker students. So again, it depends. Do I do it sometimes? Yes. Do I do it all the time? No, I don't. Students, sometimes they will prefer to play with students of their own ability. And so
I find they don't really want to do that, and it's not fun.
Right, and they feel bad that they're holding other people back, those sorts of things. So it really is a case of mix and match. And we know there are various strategies that we can use to address the mixed ability issue, and use them all as appropriate.
I think it's important to note along that line then that you offer 2 sets of games, a competitive and a non-competitive, because what can happen also is you start to reduce students' self-esteem. In some cases, if you're making almost like an elite group, I have a fear in my classroom sometimes of those who feel less inferior, that they think, oh, this is a sport and I don't like this anymore because it's too competitive. Then they start to reduce themselves and back off from the games and maybe don't give as much as they could. It's an issue that's been ongoing for years and years.
I always had them keep score, but it was never an issue, largely because they didn't keep score particularly well, you know, which is okay. You know, I mean, I'd ask them what the score was, and I knew they were going to make something up for me, but that was okay.
Well, not even keeping score though, but just knowing that when you're playing with somebody and you're being unsuccessful, even in something as similar as this, you can start to feel, oh, I'm not getting it. It doesn't matter what the score is.
Well,
sometimes it's just the game itself.
That takes us into the motivational issue of how we define success, and we probably don't want to go there at this conference. That's probably a side conference, but no, that's a very fair point.
I was just going to say that in a situation like this, they're working together. They're not spending a lot of time. You don't spend a lot of time watching the people beside you across the room or whatever. So one game could be extremely competitive, and you've got the most competitive kids there, and you've got other kids over here that are still struggling just trying to throw it across, and nobody really sees what's going on.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Steve. And please, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you for playing so well. I appreciate it. I got a bunch of handouts. I had no idea how many people would be here. Don't forget to make those alterations on the framework. All right?
And please fill out an evaluation form. They're important to Steve as well.
Thank you. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind picking up some cones and stuff, that would be nice. Thank you. Floor strips. The cones come back to me. The floor strips can go in with the balls. The floor strips can go in with the balls. The cones come back to me.